Jacob,
What's up?
you said we were going fishing.
Yeah.
Well, we got the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Got the rods and reels, tackle box. Borrow the sodas.
What else do we need?
Ain't got no lights.
Well, we need those.
We're illegal. And I know your luck. Every DNR rep in the state will come after you if you put this boat in the water with no lights.
As it touches the water. Well, we need to fix that.
Today on Cooper Heavy Industries, we're going to put lights on a boat. Doesn't that sound fun?
We'll make it fun.
Insert intro music and title sequence here. Come on, you stupid piece of garbage. What's wrong with you, you dumb car? Jeez, what is the problem? First thing we have to do is we have to get all the electronics ready for the boat. Now we need 2 navigation lights on the front, 1 navigation light on the rear. We're going to need a fuse block to protect all of these circuits. Jacob wants 2 of these pod lights in the back, and he's got a bar light to go in the front, one of those LED lights. This is the control panel we're going to use. It's got rocker switches and then 12-volt outlets, and we're going to wire all that into the fuse block. And we're going to put all of it in this cover right here. I'll get around the other side and show you. This boat comes foam filled, and we have a video of how to cut this out, which I will insert here right now. Oscillating saw, that is the trick for cutting this styrofoam inside the boat. It just goes straight in and it cuts across sideways. So once you have all the foam cut out, you've got a big cavity here inside the seat. And Jacob's bought this door, this watertight door. We're going to mount the fuse block down in here, and it'll also give him room for storage. And then we're going to put the switch panel through the front of this seat. I'm going to take all this tape off, of course. This is just so we could mark to where we were going to cut. We'll put the switch panel here so we can control everything, and then run the wire through these gullies up both sides. So if you give me a second, we will get started setting up and figuring out how we're going to wire this stuff. Okay, where Jacob's working right now, we need to cut another hole in the front to fit this block of switches through it. Now we're going to rewire all of this because this is set up to have one set of wires coming in to power everything, and I want to set it up so there's an individual fuse circuit for each one. So Jacob needs to cut a hole in the boat that is 5 1/4. All that extra sun makes it easier to see. By 3 3/4. 5 1/4 by 3 3/4. So we're going to lay that out in tape, Sharpie it up, drill it, and cut it. All right, we've laid out the tape and we marked it with speed square and a ruler, and we've got our square measured off where we need to cut. Now Jacob's going to take a drill and drill out each corner. Fancy drill. Got one of those bits that's always the wrong size. And then once we're done drilling these 4 holes, we will take a reciprocating saw or a jigsaw or Jacob's cutting personality, and we will connect the dots on that and cut this area out. Go ahead, Jacob, kill it.
That was a little bit off.
It's all right. It's not my boat.
We should do it from there and then do it. All right.
We could do this the way you're supposed to install the radio in a 3rd gen Camaro and just keep drilling holes and then cut it out with a chisel. You want to do it that way? Or do you want to do it with the saw?
Saw.
Lazy. We're going to use the saw. So the right thing to do here to connect to the battery is to use a battery cable, which has the right ends to connect up to the fuse block and the battery. So we won't use that. We're going to just make our own, and I was just going to double up and cut off this heavy gauge wire and just tape up one end for the black side, but I found a good piece of black wire that's about the right length to connect to the battery to the fuse block for the negative side. And I do have the right size ring terminals, but they're all red, so we're just going to wrap the end of that in black tape so that Jake doesn't get confused later on. So the right way to do this is to cut off the old, man, these cutters aren't real sharp, and then strip it back. These strippers might not be big enough for this gauge wire. That'll work. And then we pull off that piece of insulation. Oh, that was perfect. There we go. That's fine. And then we will, actually, that's not real good. Cut too many of the strands off the conductors. So we're going to do this the hard way, and we're just going to whittle back the insulation until we get to some good clean copper in here. There we go. Now we'll put a crimp terminal on, and these are the good crimpers. You see how they have a tooth up there at the top? Right there. You want that tooth to line up with the seam in that ring terminal. There's a seam in the metal there, so you want that to line up. Get that lined up. Twist it on there good. And then crimp that thing in there nice and tight. There. I'll do that 4 more times, and I'm going to wrap the black lead in some black tape so that Jacob doesn't get a little confused when he's changing out the battery on this. Okay, this looks like a hot mess, but it's not really that unorganized. I'm using white wires to come from the fuse block to the positive lead for each of these because, well, that's what I had. So I have a negative and a positive going to each one, except for this one. The red wire I recycled from the original. This switch is going to turn on and off these 12-volt outlets and this voltage meter. The rest of these are going to be hooked up to his lights. Now, I got to make sure I have enough of these little connectors, and I'm pretty sure I do. They just might be in my tool bag in the other car because this kit's getting a little bit empty on these. I need to refinish it. And the other end is going to be ring terminals to connect up to the screws in here. Well, I got to get the right size ring terminals, but you get the point. So the negatives will go here and the positives will go here. And I'm only going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these to put fuses in. And all of this is 14 gauge wire, which in this case is really going to be overkill. All of these lights are LED. This wire, I would again use a battery cable to connect this up if we were going to pull something that's a high amperage. But all of these are just going to be LEDs, and then he wants these here mostly just so he can have someplace to charge up his cell phone while he's out on the boat. And this gauge is mostly just going to tell him how much voltage is it going to be in the battery, because this battery is not going to be hooked up to a generator or an alternator. This boat doesn't have a lead that comes from the engine. It's just a little tiller steer. I think it's got a 10 horsepower engine on it. It's a 14-foot John boat, so it's not a big boat. So these wires are going to be sufficient for powering the lights. All of the lights on the boat are LED. So none of them are going to pull enough amperage to overheat a 14 gauge wire. In fact, the light bars come with wiring kits that I'm going to scrap and recycle, and I'll show you that when I get to it, to connect up to power those. But those are actually, they're labeled as 14 gauge, but when you cut them back on the insulation, they're 16 gauge inside. They're real cheap wiring with those light bar kits. So you need to be aware of that if you're going to use one, you need to be aware that the wiring is not really all that great. Now, I am going to run 14 gauge wire to the light bars front and rear. I'm just going to use the lighter gauge stuff basically for some jumpers here and there. If I need them. I may not even use them at all. So this is all connected up. Now I am going to go back and disassemble this again and wrap each of these connectors in electric tape, just so that they're sealed up so they don't touch each other. It's going to be kind of a belt and suspenders thing. You don't need to do it. I'm going to do it because it's going in a boat. It's going inside of a seat that he's going to throw stuff in, and I want to make sure that there's nothing to get in there and touch. And then when I get done, I'm probably going to put a piece of electric tape around all of this, because there's going to be an unused terminal for each of these. There's an extra light on each of these switches that I'm not going to wire in. It's just not needed. It's a little light right there, and it doesn't put out much light. It's just basically so you know where the switch is. Okay, we got the switch panel mounted. I got to tighten all these screws up, Got the fuse block mounted under there. Got the cables pulled through. Got to drill a hole down there and run a grommet through for them. So now you can see I've got all the black wires for the grounds pulled aside. They're going to connect right here, and all the whites, and each one of those is going to connect to one of these circuit screws right here, and then I'll put fuses in, put the cover back on, and that'll have that side done. And then we'll need to tie in, now that we'll have power to each switch, we'll have to tie the load into each switch, and we're going to run as much as we can through this gap right here. We're going to try to chase wire, because that goes all the way up the boat, and we can pull another one, come through this same grommet here and come back across, where Jacob over here has mounted his navigation light and his other little pod light back here in the back. And I think he's going to mount another pod light right here too. I'm not real sure. And then we'll have a switch for each function here, however he wants to label them, and we can shuffle the wires around as we need to. And then he'll have one switch to turn on these two power supplies in this volt gauge, so he'll know how much power is in it. And then he's going to be in charge of doing all the cleanup, because that's not my problem. And then mounting his little door once we get done with that. But I think if we get this sorted and the power pulled to the front, we might be doing pretty good for right now. All right, Jacob is at the tool putting away stage over there. All right, now everything is wired from the two battery connections through the fuse block. And I used 15 amps here because the wiring kit for the lights call for 15 amps. And I figure the running lights really need more than 10. So I might swap that out. And then there's a 15 amp for his little cigarette lighter thing. So I think that they're sufficient. If they're not, we can adjust from there. I probably will end up putting a 10 in for the running lights. Just because. Now all of the white wires are bundled together as neat as I can, and all the black wires are bundled together as neat as I can. So all the grounds are to a common ground, which go to the cable, which is going to go to the battery, and then all the hots go through here, and then these up here at the top are for these outlets and this voltmeter. And then these are going to be the on-off switches. Now we need to chase the wires front to back. And then once we pull them through, we're going to hook them in. See if I can get in there. Next, there's a connection terminal right there we're going to connect to on each individual switch. So there'll be 5 wires. One wire is already hooked up. It's for this assembly for these outlets. So I've got 1 wire for the navigation lights, 1 wire for the running lights, or for the LED light bar on the front, 1 LED for the LED light bars on the back, and then he does want a circuit underneath the side of the boat there. He wants to put LED rope light all the way down the front and back, but he didn't get them in time to do it today. So we've got it wired to there. We're not going to hook it up. So the switch is there. The switch will be live, but it's not going to be turning anything on or off right now. So now we got to start pulling wire, and once I figure that out, we will go from there. So I think I showed you these 3 tools. This stripper, this brand is just a brand, I picked it up at a local hardware store. But with those jaws, these wire strippers do an excellent job of stripping the wire without damaging the conductors. I really like these wire cutters with the crimper on them, using as a separate tool, because they have a good sharp cutting edge, and then they're dedicated for crimping, which is nice. And these have a nice big long handle, so they're easy to grab. This is one of those zip tie guns, and it grabs in that little silver pawl right there that's wiggling back and forth. You grab the tail of the zip tie and pull it, and it will cut it flush, so there's no tail sticking out, and there's nothing to cut you on the end of that zip tie, and it makes a real nice, neat, finished product. So I've been using those a lot on the last few cars that I've wired, and they make a big difference. Now you can use the ones that have the cutters and the crimpers and the strippers all in one pair of pliers that usually come with a assortment kit of electrical connections, and they work okay, but they are kind of frustrating. So using the 2 separate tools, you get better tools for doing your wire stripping job, and a better tool for your cutting and your crimping. And you know, they are kind of long and unwieldy, so I do have a regular size set of wire cutters or dikes or whatever you want to call them for cutting that do fit in smaller areas than this. But this is really good for crimping electrical connectors. While the soldering iron heats up, Jacob's got a plumber's amount of solder out here. Now, we're going to solder these connections at the front of the boat because they're very likely to get wet. So what we're going to do is first make sure you put your heat shrink tubing over your conductor. Then you're going to take your 2 conductors and twist them opposite directions of each other so that they make a nice tight twist together. Okay? You're going to do it with both conductors so they're twisted together. Like that. It's got a little bit. Get those cutters for me, Jacob. This one's got a little bit of, no, the green handle cutters. This one that's got a little bit of solder or something where it's pre-tinned, and the ends are too hard. They're not twisting in like I like. Thank you, Jacob. to do a little surgery there, because if these stick out, they will stick out through the heat shrink tubing. Let's just cut these a little bit longer here. Make sure we got a good piece of wire here to twist on, because anything that sticks out is going to mess up your connection. And that's probably hot enough. I like to hold the soldering iron underneath and then bring the solder down to it at the top, and when the wire gets hot enough, it will draw the solder down into it. And I'm using electrical solder that has a rosin core, so it's got a flux inside of it. It's designed for electrical work, so it's not designed for plumbing. It's probably has a portion of lead in it that's too high to be used for plumbing. Plus, it's so small that it would you'd use a mountain of it to seal a copper pipe up. There we go. Doesn't take much solder once it finally gets going. So once that wire gets hot, it'll draw the solder right into it. Like that. See how you can just, you brush it on, you can see how it draws it in. See? Just like that. That's done. I'll let that cool off long enough to put this heat shrink on it, and we'll heat it down. You can use a heat gun or a lighter to shrink that down. You got a lighter on you, Jake? If not, there's some in the shop. I'm going to do just a little bit of neatening up on this. That. And get that one on. Push your heat shrink on until it completely covers your solder joint, like that. And then we'll melt that down with a lighter or a heat gun, and that'll be done. There's the lighter. It doesn't take a lot. This stuff melts at a low temperature. And that is a watertight seal. So now we can test it with that little blue flashlight. And that little blue flashlight. Where'd you put the battery? There it is. And see if it works.
Oh yeah. That's the result.
Looks like you got it. All right, Jacob's finishing wiring up these two connections at the back of the boat for the rear navigation light. And yes, I know that there's a scroll here, but I have yet to get the right settings for the camera for this cheap LED light bar, but we'll get there. So we fished the wire through that rectangular chase back there at the back of the boat. Once he gets done, we're going to pull these wires into the seat where all the rest of the connections are, and then we can connect it, hook it up to our little test battery here, this little trolling motor battery or whatever it is, depth finder battery, and see if what we've done works. And then it's getting kind of late, we're getting ready to stop, but you kind of get the point. We're not going to hook up the backlights today, but we're going to see if we can get a test of the navigation lights at the front. Jacob did not bring the pole light for the back today, so we're not going to be able to test that, but we're going to be able to see if the circuit works at least. Okay, Jacob, navigation lights. Turn them off. Front light. Turn them off. Turn everything on. See if we can get a little bit. Wow, that's even worse from over here. Turn off the front light. Turn off the nav lights. Turn on the front light. There you go. Well, that's it, Jake. We have got you legal. You can take your boat out fishing now. Can't see Jacob in the dark back there. Hi, Jacob.
Hello.
All right. Well, Jake, we did not go fishing.
We did not.
We drank barley sodas.
We did do that.
We learned a little bit about wiring.
Yep.
We learned a little bit about how that fuse block works and how that switch panel works. We pulled the wires through as neat as we could, right?
Yep.
We got to still hook up the spotlights on the back of the boat, and you said you've got other lights you want to buy that we haven't got yet to go on the inside.
LED light strips that should go from the front to the back and wrap around.
Okay. So this thing's going to be seen from space when it's on the river. You're going to
hope.
scare every fish in the state.
Put the power of the sun on it.
I think we had a good time today. I think you learned a little bit. We got something
Learned
done
a lot.
at least. Got a little bit of a late start, which is why we're ending after dark, which is unusual for us, but that's okay. But thank you for watching another episode of Cooper Heavy Industries. You know the social media stuff. You know, subscribe, like, ding, comment, tell your friends, tell your enemies, that whole 9 yards. Got a couple other things in the works right now. I've got a video that I've been working on a piece of equipment. Not a vehicle, but it's a piece of equipment. I got to finish that one up. Getting ready to start on some other engine projects around the shop. Need to do some more work to Gramps, the pickup truck, which Jacob is convinced doesn't run, even though he's ridden around in it.
Piece of junk.
Paid for piece of junk that runs like a top.
Honk the horn, the windshield wipers turn on.
Yes, but I drove it today.
That's true.
That's true. And it drove all over Columbia a couple weeks back.
We did get a lot done.
Yep. And I got a couple other things that we're going to try to work on this year. Going to try to refocus on the channel a little bit. I did not have any problems with the sweet and sour sickin'. Nobody in my family really had any big problems with it. Mom and Dad got sick, but they got over it pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been real busy with work. It's a good thing. Jacob here has been not in any other videos before.
First time.
Yeah.
But
Don't worry, your check will not come.
might one day.
No.
We still have some more work to do on it though, so we may be able to finish it up.
Yep. All right.
Until next time.
Until next time. Hopefully in another couple weeks I'll have a video to you on something totally different.